17 months. 17 months a body's been cold, a case file's been open, and not one badge in Arundel County has typed the word "arrested" next to anybody's name. 17 months of candles, of unanswered voicemails, of a mother in Baltimore still setting a plate she doesn't need to set. And now, on a Wednesday afternoon in the middle of a treadmill routine, the woman the internet has been circling for a year and a half hops on Instagram Live, drops her water bottle, and tells 40,000 people that detectives just pulled up to her gym to personally hand her a get-out-of-jail-free card. Chrisean Rock. Say the name out loud. Chrisean Rock says she is officially, completely, spiritually cleared, and the police, according to Chrisean Rock, are her new best friends. Family, that math is not mathing. Not by a long shot. Not on any calculator in any jurisdiction on any planet where homicide detectives actually work for a living. Hit that subscribe button. Slap the bell. Ride with me all the way to the last sentence, because what Chrisean Rock said on that live is not the story. What Chrisean Rock did not say is the story, and by the time we're done, you're going to understand why the block is whispering that the loudest voice in Baltimore just wrote her own indictment on a live stream with a ring light. This one's got layers. Rewind a beat. And let's build it properly, from the ground up, because Chrisean Rock is counting on you being confused. I'm counting on you being awake. The man in the ground. His government name was Karan McMillan. The internet mostly knew him as Ronny Doe. Karan was 24 years old, and on February 3, 2025, Karan McMillan was found bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds outside a residence in Severn, Maryland. Time of pronouncement, 7:10 in the evening. Weather that day was gray. Neighbors say the block went silent for a full minute after the sirens cut. And Karan McMillan's people, from that day to this one, have been asking one single question that nobody with the power to answer it has answered. Who? Now before we talk about what Chrisean Rock claims investigators told her, we need to talk about who Karan McMillan actually was, because the internet flattened him into a footnote, and that flattening is doing exactly the work somebody needs it to do. Karan McMillan was not a random name that materialized in a headline. Karan was a Baltimore figure. That city, the city that Chrisean Rock has repped from the day she picked up a microphone, that city knew Karan's face. Karan and Chrisean Rock were in orbit for years. Friends first, then something more, then something publicly ugly by the time 2024 finished. And Karan McMillan, through the back half of that year, built a small but relentless online presence around one single demand. Cold paper. A DNA test. Karan believed, and Karan said it on camera more than once, on live streams, on posts, on comments, on anywhere his voice could carry, that the blue-faced infant the world knew as Chrisean Jr. might actually be Karan McMillan's biological son. That is the axis this entire saga spins on. Not the murder. The question underneath the murder. And you have to feel the room Karan McMillan was standing in when he made that demand. Baltimore streets do not play about reputations. A man publicly claiming paternity of a famous woman's child is a man making two moves at once, challenging a celebrity narrative that pays other people's bills, and embarrassing another man, a man with money, a man with a documented and widely reported courtroom history. Blueface. Jonathan Michael Porter. Behind bars for most of the relevant window. That is the room. Karan McMillan was screaming into it. Chrisean Rock was listening. Somebody, somewhere, was taking notes. Cut to the live. Chrisean Rock on camera, arms moving like conductors' batons, voice cracking like a rimshot. His death has nothing to do with me. Yes, he made my life about him. Why? Because he needed money. He was desperate. Anyway, tighten up, because that is the opening move, and the opening move on any live like this one deserves more than a shrug. Chrisean Rock has been in front of a lens long enough to have absorbed the media instincts, whether she paid a coach or not. The first sentence out of your mouth in a denial is the anchor. Every viewer, every clip, every future subpoena will hang from that anchor. And the anchor Chrisean Rock chose was not grief. Chrisean Rock did not lead with, "I lost somebody I once loved." Chrisean Rock did not lead with a simple flat, "I didn't do it." The anchor was a financial motive attached to the dead man. He needed money. That framing is not accidental. If Karan McMillan's entire public campaign was about a child, about paternity, about a name, then painting Karan McMillan as a broke opportunist reframes the DNA demand as extortion instead of fatherhood. Watch how that surgery works. You don't have to disprove the question. You only have to stain the reason it was asked. Defense attorneys use that move in courtrooms every single day. The difference is courtrooms come with cross-examination. Instagram Live comes with heart emojis and a mute button. Then, deeper into the same stream, the sentence that shook every phone on the timeline. Chrisean Rock said, and I quote as reported by multiple pop culture outlets, "Nobody was trying to save Karan before he died. Because you sit over there, you act like you wasn't trafficking the drugs through his basement. I keep being quiet because low-key I love Karan." Family, read that twice. Chrisean Rock said, present tense, I love Karan. In the same breath, Chrisean Rock accused unnamed parties of trafficking narcotics out of a specific basement. That is not a defense. That is a eulogy handed to the prosecution wrapped in a bow. Let me unpack why that one paragraph detonated. Because a lot of you felt the chill without being able to name why. That statement is doing three things at once, and not one of them helps Chrisean Rock. First, it is an accusation. Trafficking through his basement. Aimed at Karan McMillan's own circle, which implies Chrisean Rock has specific knowledge, not rumors, not blog chatter, but specific knowledge, of what was moving, where it was moving, and who was moving it. Second, it is a confession of proximity. Chrisean Rock said, I keep being quiet. Keeping quiet means having something to say. Having something to say means having information. Having information about a homicide, sitting on it for 17 months while the case goes cold, is not a good look in any state, in any jurisdiction, in any court, on any planet. Investigators call that consciousness of circumstance. Third, and this is the one nobody clocked, it is a loyalty flex aimed at a specific audience. I keep being quiet is not sent to the police. It is sent to the block. It is a message that reads, I know things, and I have protected people, and please do not force me to unprotect them. Broadcasting that message on a public live during an active homicide investigation is not defense. It is a threat with a wardrobe change. And before anybody swings at me in the comments, understand that this pattern, the live stream as a confession booth, has been Chrisean Rock's native language since day one. Chrisean Rock's entire public arc, from the Blue Girls Club era, through the Zeus Network run, through the on-camera relationship warfare with Blueface, has been built on saying the quiet part loud and cleaning it up afterward. That is the brand. That is also, in the context of an open murder file, the liability. Every past Chrisean Rock live is now potential context. Every clip is now an exhibit. Somebody, somewhere, is timestamping every second. Karan McMillan's own aunt, before this whole thing exploded, went to social media and told followers, where was y'all when he was out in New York, when he was on the drugs? That was Karan McMillan's family closing ranks in defense of Karan McMillan. But now Chrisean Rock is echoing that exact language to shield Chrisean Rock. Same words, opposite purpose. Somebody's leaning on somebody's playbook. Then there is the sister. Tesehki. Half-sister, occasional public enemy, and full-time chaos merchant. Tesehki sat down on a podcast that traveled everywhere, and Tesehki said, and I quote, if I was to speak on it, it don't look too good for certain people that we know. So I'm not going to speak on it. Cold. 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 Not a word wasted. Tesehki said everything by saying nothing. And for anybody who hasn't been following the Rock family saga, and honestly, bless your peaceful days, you need the weight of that quote, because it only lands if you know the history. Chrisean Rock and Tesehki have spent years in one of the most publicly documented sibling feuds in modern reality TV. Physical altercations on camera. Diss records essentially delivered through interviews. Whole seasons of programming built around their bad blood. These are not sisters who cover for each other out of habit. Tesehki's track record suggests Tesehki would be the first person on the mic if speaking hurt Chrisean Rock. So when Tesehki, of all people, looks into a camera and voluntarily zips it because it don't look too good, you have to ask the obvious follow-up. What is heavy enough to make the loudest member of the family go quiet? Because silence is not free for Tesehki. Silence costs Tesehki content. Silence costs Tesehki relevance. Silence costs Tesehki the one thing her career runs on. Tesehki paid that cost voluntarily. Somebody's interests were worth more than the footage. Meanwhile, TMZ, doing what TMZ does, got the police confirmation itself. The investigation is still active. An Arundel County homicide, on the record, in July of 2026, still working the file. Which directly contradicts what Chrisean Rock is telling her viewers. Chrisean Rock is saying investigators pulled up mid-workout and cleared her. Police are telling reporters the case is open. Both cannot be true. Somebody is lying, and it is not the police department. Bank on it. And here is why that contradiction matters more than it looks. Police departments do not confirm or deny the status of individual persons of interest to the press. That is basic. That is universal. So when TMZ pulls, the investigation is still active, out of a spokesperson, that is the maximum amount of information a homicide unit gives mid-case. It is not the floor. It is the ceiling. Now flip it. Chrisean Rock's claim is that detectives literally showed up at her gym to personally deliver an exoneration. Ask a simple question. What would that even mean if it were true? Detectives clear people by closing files, not by field trips. Homicide detectives do not do wellness visits. You do not get a hug from a badge. So there are really only two reads on the gym story, and neither one makes Chrisean Rock look better. Read 1, it did not happen the way Chrisean Rock described, and the live audience is being managed. Read 2, something did happen at that gym, a contact, a conversation, maybe even an interview, and what Chrisean Rock chose to present from it got re-engineered into a full clearance. Because here is the thing about telling your followers, the cops said I'm good. The cops will never publicly correct you. The claim is unfalsifiable in real time. It is only checkable by the case file, and the case file, 17 months deep, is still locked. Now let me braid this thing. February 3, 2025, Karan McMillan gets shot dead in Severn. Karan had been publicly demanding a DNA test for months, insisting Chrisean Jr., born in 2023, might be Karan McMillan's biological child. Multiple outlets confirm Karan was targeted. Not a random robbery. Not a stray. A targeted shooting. And let me put muscle on that word, because in homicide language, targeted is not a throwaway. Targeted means the shooter knew who they were looking for. Targeted means the location was not coincidence. Targeted means somebody knew Karan McMillan's schedule, Karan McMillan's routines, and Karan McMillan's face. That kind of knowledge does not come from strangers. Random violence is chaos. Targeted violence is a schedule. Days after Karan McMillan was buried, Chrisean Rock did something almost nobody caught in the moment. Chrisean Rock posted what Chrisean Rock called a paternity test to her son's Instagram story. It named Blueface, Jonathan Michael Porter, as the biological father. Case closed, right? Except the document, according to multiple pop culture reporters, was dated before Chrisean Jr. was even born. A prenatal test from 2023. And Blueface himself, the man who benefits the most from that document being real, flagged it publicly. Blueface said out loud the paperwork looked more like a legal name change filing than a real paternity result. Family, hold the phone. The father, the one man in the entire equation with financial and reputational incentive to let that document stand, is the same man who publicly called it suspicious. That is not drama. That is a signal. And let's be precise about what was being waived. A prenatal paternity test is a real thing. They exist. They are done via a blood draw from the mother. They produce a result before birth. A 2023 prenatal result is not automatically fake. But it raises a question nobody on that live and almost nobody in the coverage asked out loud. If a test existed in 2023 that established paternity, why did the paternity war continue through all of 2024? Why the on-camera doubts? Why the back and forth? Why did the Who's the Father storyline keep printing money for another year and change if a lab had already answered the question before Chrisean Jr. took his first breath? Either the document is not the answer it is being sold as, or a question with a known answer was kept artificially alive for engagement. Neither option is flattering. One of them is a lot worse than the other. So the deleted post, the interview, the filing. Karan McMillan spent the back half of 2024 chasing a DNA test in public. Karan McMillan died in February 2025. Within days, a document surfaces that supposedly ends the paternity question forever, and the document is old. It predates the child. It predates the fight. It sat somewhere for close to 2 years, unused, unseen, until the exact moment the only man loud enough to demand a live test is no longer breathing. That timing, hold on, back up. Let me reframe this because I keep tripping on it. The paper existed. The demand existed. Karan McMillan existed. Only one of those three got removed from the equation before the paper got shown. That is not a sequence you draw up in a boardroom. That is a sequence that either happens to you, or a sequence you build. Which is exactly why detectives are still ringing doorbells 17 months later. And here is a detail about that 17 months I have not seen anybody sit with. Homicide cases go cold for all kinds of reasons. No witnesses, no forensics, no cooperation. That is the tragic norm in a lot of American jurisdictions, and the Baltimore metro area knows that reality intimately. But this specific case does not have the usual cold case profile. The victim was internet famous. Karan McMillan's final year of life is documented in clips. Karan McMillan's grievances are archived. Karan McMillan's relationships are mapped across years of public posts and receipts. Detectives are not starting from a blank page here. Detectives are starting from one of the most self-documented social circles in the entire reality streaming ecosystem. If this case is still open after 17 months, it is probably not because there is nothing to look at. It is much more likely because there is a lot to look at, and looking at it takes time for reasons we are about to get to. Time that might be exactly what somebody needed. Fast forward. June of 2026. Chrisean Rock is on Hollywood Unlocked confirming a location publicly, then within weeks Chrisean Rock is on live telling followers she is moving out of the country. We're moving out the country. We ain't going to tell you all details, but we're moving. Then, almost overlapping, a full religious rebrand. Baptism footage. Church is my happy place. Refusing gifts on religious grounds. Leaving secular music for gospel. That entire rollout traced on Chrisean Rock's own Instagram. Country exit, Christianity, cooperation with cops, confession, all in the same 6-week window. Family, that is not healing. That is public relations triage. Now I want to be careful and fair, because faith is real, and people genuinely do find God under pressure, and Chrisean Rock would not be the first public figure to walk into a sanctuary when the world got heavy. So I am not mocking the baptism. I am auditing the sequencing. Because in crisis management, there is an actual playbook, and it is old. Step 1, change the visual language around the client. Soft colors. Family settings. Sanctuaries. Step 2, change the vocabulary. Fewer beefs, more blessings. Step 3, change the geography if the legal weather gets hot. Any publicist in any city will tell you those 3 steps are the standard triage protocol, and the reason they work is because audiences are forgiving and algorithms are forgetful. But when you see all 3 steps executed inside 6 weeks, in the middle of an open homicide investigation, while telling a live audience that police personally cleared you at the gym, the grace red and the strategy red start to blur, and from the outside, no instrument on earth can measure which one is steering the wheel. One more thing about the move abroad announcement, because the phrasing slipped by. We ain't going to tell you all details. Public figures announce relocations all the time. That is content. That is a house tour waiting to happen. What public figures do not usually do is announce a departure while withholding the destination. A move is a flex. A move with the destination redacted is something else entirely. You do not hide a vacation. You hide a jurisdiction. Bank on it. Now zoom in on the legal forensics. Anne Arundel County is Maryland state jurisdiction. Not federal. Which means the feds language Chrisean Rock keeps throwing around on live. The feds came to me, the investigators told me, is either linguistically loose or she is talking about a completely different agency. If federal agents are involved in a state homicide, that usually means one thing. Interstate elements. Movement of a suspect, a weapon, or a conspiracy across state lines. That is not a routine local knock. And for the jurisdictional profile in the TMZ report, this case sits with local homicide detectives, not federal. Somebody is blurring the badge. And here is why the badge blurring is worth more than a nitpick. When a public figure tells an audience, the feds talk to me, most viewers hear authority and stop listening. The word does the work. But the word also smuggles in an implication. Federal involvement sounds bigger, more official, more final. If the feds cleared you, who could argue? It is the jurisdictional version of name-dropping. The problem is every report on record describes a county case run by county detectives in a state system. There is no reported federal footprint. So the feds language is either a sloppy vocabulary habit or a deliberate upgrade of the authority vouching for innocence. One is careless. One is strategic. And in this story, careless and strategic keep wearing the same outfit. Now the behavioral forensics. Watch the deflection choreography. Every question about Karan McMillan's death gets rerouted to Karan McMillan's drug use. Every question about the DNA test gets rerouted to, why does that matter now? Every question about the timeline gets rerouted to Chrisean Rock's own trauma. It is a three-step. Acknowledge, redirect, victimize. On a loop. If you graph the live, you see the same triangle every 90 seconds. And notice what the redirects all have in common. Every single one moves the question away from verifiable territory into unverifiable territory. Whether Karan McMillan used drugs is a lifestyle question, cannot be checked in the moment, and it puts the audience in judgment of the dead man instead of the living speaker. Why does that matter now, is a philosophical shrug, also uncheckable. Chrisean Rock's own trauma is real and hazy, the one subject on earth where nobody can fact-check her. Concrete question, abstract answer. Every single time. That is not how innocent confusion sounds. Innocent confusion rambles toward specifics and trips over them. This was the opposite. A stream of consciousness that somehow never once tripped over a checkable fact. 40 minutes of talking and the record picked up almost nothing a detective could actually use. You can call that trauma brain. You can also call it message discipline from a woman who has spent her adult life in front of a lens. Then the verbal forensics. One word. Chrisean Rock said, low-key, I love Karan. Present tense. Love. Not loved. A woman who allegedly had nothing to do with a man's death typically does not need to hedge her affection for him in real time. The tense slip is the tell. Grief speaks in past tense. Guilt speaks in present. That is not a rule of law. That is a rule of language. And look, before the comments come, tense slips happen. People misspeak on camera every day. A live is not a deposition. But statement analysis exists as a discipline for a reason, and investigators do use it. One of its oldest observations is that speakers betray their true relationship to a subject through exactly these small grammatical choices. Past tense means the relationship has ended. Present tense means, in the speaker's mind, something is still alive, still active, still ongoing. Karan McMillan has been in the ground for a year and a half. What exactly is still ongoing? Who is that sentence still talking to? Maybe nobody. Maybe it is just a slip. But in a stream where every other word seemed to root around the checkable, the one word that slipped through the routing was that one. Mark it. Do with it what you will. Now, this is where you watch the story fracture across outlets, and each fracture tells you who is protecting what. Complex played it straight arrow. Unsolved, ongoing, no arrests. Here are the facts. Clinical. Careful. Zero editorializing. Given Complex's history of leaning into hip-hop drama, that dry read is almost strategic. When Complex goes dry, they are usually anticipating a libel exposure. They are covering their glass. TMZ framed it around Chrisean Rock's denial. Headline structure that centers Chrisean Rock's voice, not the victim, not the family. That framing choice matters. TMZ knows Chrisean Rock's audience clicks. Making Chrisean Rock the subject of the sentence pulls that audience in. That is not neutral. That is traffic engineering. Meanwhile, the streets are saying reels leaned into crowdsourced accusation. And that is where most young viewers are actually getting the story, not from Complex, from a 15-second reel that starts with, the streets are saying. Which is legally bulletproof and morally slippery. 3 outlets. 3 different stories. Same corpse. And here is the 4th outlet nobody lists, the live itself. Because the most important media property in this entire saga is not Complex, is not TMZ, is not any blog. It is Chrisean Rock's own account. Chrisean Rock is the single largest distribution channel in her own case. When Chrisean Rock goes live, she reaches more people faster with zero editorial filter than every outlet covering her combined. That is the structural shift that makes this story genuinely modern. The subject of an open investigation can out-broadcast the investigation. Police communicate through spokespeople and press releases, on the record, with lawyers reading every word. Chrisean Rock communicates through a front camera, raw, unmediated, to an audience primed to believe her. It is not a fair fight over the narrative. One side has rules. The other side has ring lights. Now the loudest counter-narrative deserves a fair swing. The Steelman version goes, Chrisean Rock is a public figure being scapegoated for a crime with no ballistic tie, no witness statement, no charging document, and a boyfriend who was reportedly moving product out of a basement in a state with active gang activity. That is a plausible universe. Karan McMillan had public enemies. Live-streamed enemies. A drug lifestyle carries risk that has nothing to do with paternity disputes. And let me Steelman it even harder before I test it, because it deserves the full weight. Scapegoating famous women for street violence is a real, documented pattern. The internet does it constantly, and it does it with special enthusiasm when the woman is loud, black, tattooed, and unrepentant, because she has already been cast as the villain in 100 other storylines. Chrisean Rock's entire public history, the fights, the arrests, the chaos, means the audience walked into this story with a pre-written character sheet. It is easy to believe the worst about her. But ease is not evidence. And the alternative theory of the crime is not exotic. If the basement operation Chrisean Rock described on live was real, and Chrisean Rock described it herself, which is the wildest part, then Karan McMillan was sitting on top of exactly the kind of economy that produces targeted shootings without any celebrity involvement at all. Drug disputes. Territory. Money owed. A man with enemies and inventory is a man with exposure. But then you weigh that against a paternity document that predates the child, a public exit plan mid-investigation, and a sister who will not say the words but keep circling them like a buzzard on a wire. And the Steelman gets thinner. Not gone. Thinner. You can be scapegoated and be shady. Both things can live in the same body. And here is the synthesis the comment sections never reach, because the camps have spent 17 months screaming past each other. The scapegoat theory and the suspicion theory are not actually enemies. They can coexist in the same case file. Chrisean Rock can be a genuinely over-scrutinized public figure by a narrative that was waiting for her, and Chrisean Rock can also be a person whose behavior around a specific death keeps generating legitimate questions. The internet demands you pick one frame because picking one frame is what gets engagement. But real cases do not care about frames. And notably, detectives have not picked one either. An open file with no arrests after 17 months is its own statement. Detectives have not cleared the narrative, and detectives have not closed it. Everybody else picked a side. The people with the actual evidence chose to keep looking. Now here is the read the press cannot print because it cannot be sourced without a subpoena. Everybody is chasing the murder question. Did she do it? Did she order it? Did she know? That is the wrong question. Wrong not because it does not matter, but because the answer is locked in a police file we are not getting until charges drop, if they ever do. The right question is a different question entirely. What economic engine did Karan McMillan threaten? Let me build it. Chrisean Jr. is a brand asset. That is uncomfortable to say out loud, but it is true. The child's proximity to Blueface, a rapper with active label deals, streaming revenue, and brand equity, is monetizable in ways that reach far beyond child support. Content, cameos, merch, reality TV spin-offs, documentary rights. Custody drama sells better than any single. And every dollar of that ecosystem depends on one immovable assumption, the last name attached to the baby. Understand this is not theoretical economics. This model has a track record. The Chrisean Rock and Blueface relationship, in all its chaos, was one of the most reliably monetizable sagas in the history of the reality streaming era. The fights trended. The breakups trended. The reconciliations trended. Networks built programming around their orbit. Clips of their worst moments did numbers most artists' best moments never touch. The machine proved, over and over, that dysfunction between these two people converted directly into views, and views converted directly into money. The child did not enter that machine as a child. The child entered it as the final unkillable storyline. The thing that would keep two volatile people narratively chained together forever. Generating content whether they loved each other, hated each other, or never spoke again. Custody content. Co-parenting content. Birthdays. Court dates. Holiday disputes. The machine does not need them together. The machine just needs the last name to stay fixed. Because the last name is the through line every future storyline hangs from. Karan McMillan threatened the last name. Not with violence. With science. A confirmed DNA test proving Karan McMillan was the biological father would not just embarrass. It would detonate. The child's marketability collapses overnight. The blueface storyline gets rewritten from co-parenting saga to she was lying the whole time. Every past appearance, every viral clip, every payday retroactively reads as a con. Sponsors run. Labels distance. The whole Chrisean Rock and blueface content universe, worth allegedly into 7 figures across their years of virality, implodes. And the detonation would not stop at Chrisean Rock. That is the part that widens the blast radius beyond one woman's reputation. Blueface himself, from behind bars where he was serving time through much of this window, would lose the family man storyline that humanized the brand. Blueface other relationships, Blueface other children's storylines, Blueface whole co-parenting economy gets relitigated in public. The network that built programming around the couple has a library of content that retroactively curdles. Family members whose income proximity to the saga fed lose the saga. Managers. Publicists. Platforms. Everyone who drew a check off the Chrisean Rock and blueface engine had a shared unspoken interest in one thing. The paternity question staying a question. Questions are content. Answers are audits. Karan McMillan was not threatening a woman. Karan McMillan was threatening a revenue stream with a lot of mouths attached to it. And revenue streams historically defend themselves. Not always with violence. Almost never traceably with violence. But with lawyers. With documents. With narrative management. And with patience. That is not motive for murder. Legally, we cannot say that. Ethically, I will not. But it is motive for silence at all costs. Motive for a paternity document mysteriously dated in 2023 to appear the moment a demand is no longer being made. Motive for a country exit. Motive for a religious rebrand. Motive for an Instagram live that spends 40 minutes talking about drugs in a basement and about 90 seconds addressing whether a child belongs to a dead man. The industry does not murder. The industry insulates. And insulation in 2026 looks like a document, a plane ticket, and a rosary. Say it plain. This story is not about who pulled the trigger. This story is about who wrote the paperwork. Sit with that. And while you sit with it, one more layer, because the paperwork theme goes deeper than one document. Think about what paper has done in this story from the start. A paternity claim answered with a filing instead of a swab. A clearance from police delivered as a story told on live instead of a document anyone can request. An exit from the country announced without a destination, an itinerary that presumably exists as actual paper nobody has shown. A baptism that now exists as footage. Content has papered over the timeline. Every single hard question in this saga has been answered with an artifact that gestures at proof without ever being proof. And every single hard question that has been answered with something verifiable, the open investigation, the targeted shooting determination, the still active status, has pointed in the opposite direction. Verifiable things keep contradicting artifacts. 17 months in, that is the cleanest pattern this story has produced. Paper says one thing. The record says another. One of them is winning the internet. The other one is winning the case file. Only one of those two rooms has subpoena power. Now watch how the next 90 days play out. Do not be shocked when a second paternity test, a real one, court-ordered, post-mortem eligible via Karan McMillan's next of kin, starts getting whispered about in filings. Karan McMillan's family has cause. Karan McMillan's aunt is already on record. All it takes is one civil probate action out of Maryland. And suddenly the 2023 document Chrisean Rock waved around has to survive cross-examination. That is the path most likely to land, because that path does not require any homicide charge to move. That path just requires grief plus a lawyer plus a swab. And civil court lives in a different universe than criminal court. Criminal court needs proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest bar in American law, and the reason 17 months have passed with no arrests. Civil court needs a preponderance. 51%. And civil court comes with discovery. Compelled documents. Compelled testimony. Sworn depositions. The three-step deflection triangle does not work in that room, because there is a court reporter, a notary, and a lawyer whose entire job is noticing the redirect. The 2023 document does not just get waved at a camera in that room. The 2023 document gets authenticated. Chain of custody. Lab accreditation. Metadata. Who audited it? Who paid for it? Who held it for 2 years, and why it surfaced the week it surfaced? Every question the live routed around becomes a question a judge can compel an answer to. That is why smart money watches the civil docket, not the criminal one. Criminal cases punish. Civil cases reveal. And revelation is the one thing this entire ecosystem has been organized for 2 years to prevent. The next window is louder. Once Chrisean Rock actually leaves the country, and Chrisean Rock has telegraphed enough times that it is not a bluff, expect the US media cycle to reframe Chrisean Rock overnight. Chrisean Rock stops being a controversial reality figure and becomes a person of interest fled abroad. That reframe alone changes brand deals. Streaming metrics. Algorithmic reach. Chrisean Rock's own team will scramble to spin it as a spiritual retreat. Will not matter. The internet already wrote that caption in a Google Doc 6 months ago. And there is a hard-edged consequence to the exit almost nobody has raised. Jurisdiction. Leaving the country does not end an investigation. Everybody knows that much. But it changes the mechanics of every next step. Interviews that were a drive away become diplomatic. A future grand jury subpoena becomes an extradition question. Extradition questions depend entirely on which country, which treaty, which charges, if any. None of that means flight implies guilt. People move abroad for 100 innocent reasons, and celebrities do it for taxes, for peace, for content. But the destination Chrisean Rock declined to name will matter enormously if the case ever heats up. And the fact that Chrisean Rock declined to name it means somebody in Chrisean Rock's orbit already knows. Legal counsel does not let a client announce an international move mid-investigation without a conversation. Either the conversation happened and the move is calculated, or it did not happen and the move is chaos. Given the discipline of every other move in that 6-week window, I know which one I would bet on. Now the aftershock. 5 years out. This is the part nobody is thinking about. Chrisean Jr. becomes a teenager. Teenagers ask questions. Teenagers Google. A child raised in the wreckage of unresolved paternity, an unsolved murder, a religious pivot mother, and a father whose relevance rises and falls with prison stints, that child is going to want answers. And the internet is going to be very, very happy to supply them. Whatever gets buried in 2026 does not stay buried. It comes back in 2031 wearing headphones and a phone with better search than we have got now. Whoever wins the next 90 days does not win the story. The story belongs to Chrisean Jr. Eventually. The opposition, the she was framed camp, is going to fumble one specific thing. They are going to keep defending the paternity document. That is the weakest tile in the mosaic. Once anyone with real legal training pulls on that thread in an actual courtroom, the whole cloth unwinds. You cannot out-argue a lab result with an Instagram caption. Something is going to crack. Might be a filing. Might be a family member. Might be Chrisean Rock herself, on live at 3 in the morning, unable to help it. You will see. One last marker to watch, because the cracks in stories like this one almost never come from where you are staring. The cracks do not come from the principal. Principals get coached. Principals get careful. And Chrisean Rock, whatever else is true about Chrisean Rock, has survived a decade of cameras by knowing exactly where the lens is. The cracks come from the perimeter. The friend who did not get the payout that month. The cousin who feels unseen. The associate who gets picked up on something unrelated and suddenly has something to trade. 17 months of silence in a circle this large, this online, and this monetized, that is not loyalty holding. That is pricing holding. And pricing, in every case like this one that eventually broke, is a temporary condition. Somebody's number gets met, or somebody's patience runs out, or somebody's grief outgrows their check. Karan McMillan's family is still out there. Karan McMillan's aunt is still on record. The demand for the swab is still alive. And it is the one demand in this entire story that gets stronger with time instead of weaker, because every year that passes without it is another year it looks like somebody is afraid of it. The clock is not neutral in this case. The clock is a witness. And the clock is still testifying. Alright, that is where I leave it. You rode all the way to the end, which means you already know exactly what to do. Hit like. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell. And be here when part 2 drops, because the paperwork on this one is just getting warmed up. Drop your read in the comments. Are you team Scapegoat or team Suspicion, or are you sitting where I am sitting, watching a civil docket that has not been filed yet? I am reading every single reply. The paperwork remembers everything. So do we. See you in the next one.